All right, ladies and gentlemen, our panel discussion is titled Considerations of Floating Offshore Wind in the Asia Pacific, and I'd like to welcome the moderator, NIRAS Taiwan, Mr. Raoul Kubitschek, and our panelist, CEO of BlueFloat, Mr. Carlos Martin Rivals, Offshore Technical Lead at APAC, EDF Renewables, Ms. Elisabeth Palix, and APAC Director at OWC, Mr. Tom Whittle, EPC Director at CIP Taiwan Round 3 Projects, Mr. Henrik Lehmann, and Professor Kai Tong Ma at National Taiwan University.
Ma 教授在哪里?
Is Dr. Ma in the hall right now, or maybe he is at the hallway?
Okay, these were, let me just
please take a seat. Yes, welcome.
We're a little bit delayed. These were actually quite good presentations, and I think every company made their point, or technology providers made their points. So I have the pleasure then, if my panel is complete at some point, to share the stage with some speakers that have been here and then some new entrants. So
welcome, Dr. Ma. Welcome. And I'd like to also remind our speakers, those microphones are all turned on already, and we will be controlling the volume for you. Right. Thank you.
Good. Then for this panel, I would like to kick off with some questions for the individual panel members, and then we see how it goes. APAC is exciting, but we also hear it's very, very complex. It's a new technology, which, by the way, makes it actually quite interesting for Taiwan, because you could do a jump. You don't reinvent something. You can be part of something new, and you can, accelerate on that phase, and you don't try to build jackets again like everybody else did in Europe back then. I would like to actually start with Elisabeth from EDF Renewables. Perhaps a bit of sharing, because in APAC we are also looking at all these issues from infrastructure, technical point of view, and then later we will also touch upon with the panel on road to markets, to share a little bit more about the Lyon project and what are the learnings and how does that translate. For we heard like all these interesting markets, Taiwan coming up, South Korea for a long time talking about it, Japan, Australia having potential, and the Philippines. So there's a lot of markets, but what can be already shared from that experience in that context?
Yeah, thank you, Raoul. So it's a very exciting moment right now for us, for the PGL project. You saw many pictures through the day. So our 3 floaters are at sea. So it's getting closer to the success of this project. So it was a long journey for the team. We started something like 10 years ago. Initially, the turbine was even a vertical axis turbine. So many changes through this journey. So many technical challenges that we had to overcome. So a lot of learnings, I would say. How to do the certification of the turbulence intensity, for instance. How to manage the dynamic cable. We didn't talk too much about this, but it's part of the technical challenge we need to overcome for the floating. So also the new way, I would say, to work with the supply chain, with the O&M. I think, Carlos, you clearly said that floating technology, it's quite different than bottom things. So it's not because you have a long history of working with the O&M for bottom fix that it will be a successful floating. So it's completely a new way, I would say, to work with them, and also particularly 10 years ago when floating was something a bit scary for O&M. That's also one of the reasons why we went for TLP, because TLP is not moving much, so it was a bit less scary for them at that time. Hopefully, all the industry learned a lot through all the demo projects that we talked about today. So I really want to say that the interest of demo is to grow together. It's not only the developers that learn, and of course we learn a lot. We develop our own coupled tool to do the design of floaters. So we are now able to do even co-engineering with companies like Ideal for the tender in France, but with other concept provider in other places in the world. But it's also the fact that we grow together with the O&M, with the supply chain, with the port authority, so that we will be all ready for the next stage, that is the commercial stage. But just to say that the demo project has also its own challenge, and Dr. Ma clearly says that the port infrastructure in Taiwan are maybe not ready for the demo project. They will be ready for the commercial stage, but it's really a challenge for a demo project. Someone also mentioned that demo, I think it's someone from PPI who mentioned that it's not so much attractive, a demo project. It's only a few units, and you have also commercial projects in the world, so it's better to go for 1 gigawatt than for only 50 megawatt. For O&M also to get a turbine for a demo project, it's really something very difficult. And I think what I just said is applicable for any project in the world. But regarding APAC, that is the subject of today, we will have also other challenges to overcome, like the typhoon. We understood that some technology already passed more than 16, Bruno, I think, typhoon already in Japan. But earthquake also, I mean, some technology might not be adapted if there is some permanent tension in the anchor. So yeah, new challenges to be overcome.
Good. Thank you. And then I wanted to ask Professor Ma, which I don't, on the other side. Yeah. You're a veteran in oil and gas, and you come back to Taiwan to educate the next generation, but in floating wind, which I very much applaud, and National Taiwan University is doing a great job, as is National Cheng Kung universities and other universities, because compared to, let's say, 2012, we now see some universities already looking at floating wind, starting to, you know, get the first students out looking into that. And also congratulations on the first class that has graduated, the first 3, and we hope there will be more to come. What do you think is the role of academia in Taiwan to further the whole discussion, and, you know, what kind of research or cooperation would be interesting to perhaps integrate also some European thinking in all these local challenges that are there?
Yeah, I can tell you this, Taiwan doesn't have oil and gas. So the offshore industry, there's no offshore industry in the past. Until only a few years ago, we start to have fixed button offshore wind turbine, wind farms installed, right? So in that sense, the industry here does not have as many consulting firm, design firm, you know, developers as the other countries. So that's the weakness. And so I would say from the academia point of view, what we, the educators, should be doing is trying to cultivate a better industry here, almost starting from scratch. But the good thing is, even though Taiwan is really small, a small island, there are quite a few universities that has departments of like naval architecture and ocean engineering. And I can, right away off my mind, I can think of National Taiwan University. And we have Cheng Kung University, Professor Yang is there. We have Zhongshan University, Ocean University. So you see, each of the university is generating, I would say, from 50 to 100 students each year. So you actually have lots of young talents coming out. My suggestion to you guys is that try to set up maybe a summer internship program with some of the department or professors, and that's the best way. You spend 2 months with the candidates, and then they know you, you know them, you know which one is the best. You know, maybe just pick 2 or 3 students each summer, and then you will get your best candidate. Yeah. So, but overall, I think we are starting from almost nothing, just because we don't have that industry in the past. But we have a pretty strong naval architecture industry, shipbuilding. Yeah, so that's a good thing. And today's afternoon, we're focusing on floating wind, right? Floating wind is about floating structures. That's naval architecture. So that's another good thing that we have. All right.
Yeah. Thank you. And what would be the contribution to cost down? From academia, like what would be the contribution to help to cost down projects in Taiwan?
What do you mean cost?
Cost down, so what we
Cost
want
down.
to achieve is like probably the first feed-in tariff will be very high, but then we would like to, you know, build economies of scale, so.
Yeah, I think probably many of you are developers. You probably have done your, economic analysis. So I've heard quite a few speakers talking about bankable. This is a term that I never heard in my career back in the States. Yeah. So cost down is really not my specialty, but I'm an engineer. I was an engineer, and now I'm a teacher. But I do know that even though our technology is ready, and also some of you are saying that we need a demo. We're not going to demonstrate that the technology is ready. We're trying to make sure that the project, the contract, the infrastructures are ready, right? So in terms of cost down, earlier I made my presentation. I have 5 points. Every single point is going to affect your cost. You know, from whether do you have several shipyards to choose from? Sorry, no, you don't. There's only one shipyard, only one dry dock, only one here in Taiwan. So is there a land yard? Yeah, maybe. Can we do a floating dock? Yeah, maybe in Taipei port. So that's the things that we need to think about. And the other thing, the most important thing is, do we have a port that's ready for floating wind for the turbine integration? No, we don't. Not even close. The 2 WFOs that I was talking about, WFO 38 and WFO 106, those are not for floating wind, sorry. No, because the Taichung port is so busy. You have all the commercial vessels coming in and out. It's almost impossible. I wouldn't say totally impossible, but it's very difficult to allow a giant structure, a semi-submersible of 90 meters wide coming into the harbor. So that's gonna interfere with all the traffic there. So I do know that Taichung Port is working on something. They are thinking about maybe on the other side, outer side of the WFO 106 to make it to set up a plan. They're only at this stage. They're only trying to set up a stage. So in terms of time frame, I think we are talking about a few years before that WFO is there, and our floating wind platform can use the WFO. So that's the key. That's the number one thing that I think we need to focus on.
Okay. And I think Carlos would like to.
Yeah, just building on that point, fully agree. And we like it or not, that integration port is needed not for the commercial projects, but for the pre-commercial ones already. We need to install those turbines, even if there are fewer of them. So coming back to the role of academic, which I think is absolutely critical, I think apart from training a generation of engineers and technicians, which will be needed, I think academics are also a very important sounding board for policies, for public policies, because there needs to be a public support. I'm not meaning necessarily economic, but also in terms of policy, in terms of facilitating plans for things like infrastructure. I want to raise, to share an experience we had recently with a turbine manufacturer in a floating project we are developing in a different market. It's a commercial scale project, and we were discussing about how to ensure the supply of the turbines. The first question that was asked, is, what is the integration port you're gonna use? Because if you don't have an integration port, a credible answer to this question, I don't want to talk to you any longer, because you're not ready. That was the first reaction from a major turbine manufacturer for a floating wind project. So very much agree with this point, and again, being a sounding board for public policy, I think, is a major role for academics.
Okay, fair point. But I also think Taiwan is often very flexible in finding solutions. So, but it's good to. It also shows that the discussion has advanced, and now it's more on more and more details on how to fix that. Perhaps first to to also give a question to Tom from Offshore Wind Consultants. So also happy to see another engineering consultancy on that stage. Perhaps in terms of the observation, if you look at this big APAC market and all these wonderful talks and possible theoretical pipelines, while they have not been solidified by the governments, not necessarily that any government really said, like, this is our timeline, this is how many gigawatts we will support. What do you see in terms of, you know, also the challenge of all these different designs of getting up manufacturing in the region and the infrastructure from the perspective on engineering consultancy?
Okay, so I think in terms of the question on the market, obviously there's a few key markets in Asia that have been developing offshore wind. Now Taiwan was really the first mover, but in terms of floating, it's been the first mover or the first market to really push it has been South Korea. And there's some projects there that are a bit further in development in terms of permitting process. Japan has got some demonstration projects installed, obviously the Fukushima Forward projects, but in terms of building on that has been pretty slow to move. There is a plan in Japan to announce a target specifically for floating wind by the end of the year. So I think it'll be the first market which is really differentiating floating from fixed bottom in terms of its targets. And government has put forward a plan called the Green Innovation Fund, which is putting a lot of support, a lot of financial support to developing technology developed by Japanese companies and also to demonstrate them. So I think the Green Innovation Fund for floating wind is in the region of about $850 million, and that's to develop the technology and actually to demonstrate it. So you can see that they're putting a lot of support into the development of this new technology. Taiwan historically hasn't been pushing floating, but now is kind of catching up and potentially has the opportunity to move ahead with this demo project. It's probably got the most concrete deadline and timeline for a project of a significant scale in floating wind in APAC. So I think Taiwan is definitely got the potential to move ahead and be one of the leaders in floating wind. In terms of the technology, the floater, is challenging because there's been a lot of development and a lot of innovation in the technology, and a lot of the challenges with the floater technology is about fabrication, how to manufacture the floaters at the required scale to bring down the costs. And that requires a huge amount of space on the quayside and the infrastructure. We've talked about the port and harbors. And there are some advances in how to minimize the times to fabricate and manufacture those technologies. But these innovations will still potentially need to be demonstrated to make them more bankable. So there's technologies which have been demonstrated historically, and then there's these new, more innovative technologies or just innovative fabrication methodologies which will hopefully have the opportunity to be demonstrated in the projects.
Thanks. And then perhaps to stay on Taiwan and perhaps more to road to market, and a question for Henrik as the EPC director for around 3 projects, both fixed and floating. The government is still in Taiwan, currently, as also this presentation this morning, still on track in 23. So at least they didn't specifically say in which quarter, but it at least said 23. What do you think? And then Carlos or Elisabeth can also tune in on that one. What's kind of the missing thing to make perhaps the project owners comfortable, the supply chain, how to approach that Taiwan can really move in front of everyone?
Yeah, so I think I'll sort of return to what was explained by Claire earlier today. There's these sort of 4 pillars. And I think for CIP as the sponsor of our projects, obviously the financing challenge is the key. So the clear regulatory framework, again, bankable feed-in tariff system that creates a stable environment for the investments. Then we talked a lot about the infrastructure. And to sort of look at the road to market from a sort of project developer point of view, I think for these, we call it demonstration project in Taiwan, but maybe pre-commercial project is also a good term for that. It's not so much about innovating the technology. I think it's also well explained by the technology providers here that the technology is already there. But there's a lot of innovation required to innovate the workarounds of all the missing pieces. For instance, the lack of infrastructure would require very sort of innovative solutions. We will basically need to build the supply chain for this step by step. And that's why we think this sort of pre-commercial demonstration project in Taiwan is a critical stepping stone. It probably needs to be like a APAC integrated supply chain, similar to what we're already seeing in Taiwan. We are also passing on the message also to government that the current situation sort of doesn't cater for deep localization as it is in the Round 3 framework. So the sort of framework around the floating demo without having sort of clear industrial localization requirements on it is key to make it fly. And then there's the sort of this stakeholder elements, and I think it's wise by the government to really sort of focus on that in the framework, that there's sort of the academic collaboration, but there's also some solutions to be found by the sort of smaller scale before we move up to really 100 megawatt scale or gigawatt scale around the fishermen, coexistence with the fishery community and other stakeholders as well. And also the environmental aspects. I mean, here we talk about the white dolphins. Actually, some of these sites, I've heard, we have whale watching events going on in our sites because of the sort of vast community of whales. So we also need to deal with that and how that impacts marine lions and whales, by the way. So we probably also need to sort of build comfort for coexistence with the environment as part of these demonstration projects as well. So we have to break it down in smaller pieces and start working on this. It's actually quite big scale, the pre-commercial projects, to make way for the very, very large scale commercial projects that will follow.
Yeah, maybe to just add on what you said, we need visibility also to step from the, I agree completely, it's not demo, but pre-commercial project to the commercial project. So I think if we go back to Japan, they were among the first one to put some demo at sea. But the thing is, it was not followed by commercial projects, so it's kind of a pity that they were quite advanced, but no, South Korea might be the next big one coming. So for Taiwan, we really need to get some visibility on what will be the rules for the commercial project. And also, floating cannot compete with bottom fix today, so we need, some incentive, I would say, for floating, or we need maybe to find a way, like in France, to not get the bottom fix competing with floating. In France, we have separated tenders for bottom fix and for floating, so we are not comparing pears and apple. We are really, getting a fair competition, I would say.
Fully agree. I think having that visibility is critical. At the end of the day, what do we want, not just the pre-commercial, but also the first commercial projects there? We want them to give a signal, a strong signal to investors, not just in Taiwan, but from anywhere else, to come to this market, to start training people, to invest in new infrastructure, so that there can be an industry out of it. That's what we want these projects for. And we can talk about also about financial institutions, certification, classification entities, and so on and so forth. Even students, when they have to select where they want to study, giving a strong signal that floating wind will be something big and the government is serious about it is super important. So fully agree with what just has been commented. There's other case examples about markets realizing that floating wind is very different from fixed bottom. France is a good example. UK has a specific pot in its CFD tenders for floating. So we all are here to reach this objective, long-term objective of talking only about offshore wind. Reality today is that we are not there, and we will not get there unless there is a clear policy to reach that objective. So fully agree on what has just been commented. Some additional elements, I already mentioned some of them in my intervention before. Better to go for 3 projects than 3 pre-commercial projects. It's just so difficult. It's just so amazingly difficult to put these projects into the water. So leveraging our experience, as Bruno was commenting before, is very important. You need to have experience, again, in floating wind. And be careful because teams rotate a lot in this industry, so it's really about the people who have those capabilities. It's about so having not just 1, 2, ideally more, failure rate could exist. And if eventually you have 3 in the water, even better. But we've seen in France that it's not easy, and there was one of the 4 projects that failed. I think it's about moving fast. So having visibility for the long term is good, but having a visibility early on, there's a race today for developing floating wind worldwide. Investors, turbine manufacturers, technology providers have to select where to put their bets. So the more we wait, the more difficult it will be to attract that attention. We've seen it in other markets. Spain was planning to launch a tender this year, and the tender is expected to be delayed for next year. That doesn't help developing that market. So having visibility early on, I think, is very important. I hear a lot of messages around how expensive it is, high feed-in tariff, typhoons, and so on and so forth. I would like to put some distance into that. Typhoons, it's just another boundary condition. When you talk to turbine manufacturers, they're not concerned about typhoons. We need to take into account for design, for sure, but technical solutions are there to address that. So I wouldn't be too concerned about it, just taking into account the right way. Likewise, the level of cost we're talking about here, never easy to justify in front of taxpayers and so on and so forth. So I wouldn't say it's easy. But we need to put things in the context of what we're talking about here. We're talking about developing a whole new industry. We're talking about attracting investors from who are competing in different markets. And we are talking about setting the basis for something which is not only important for the country, it's important for the region. So in a time of history where we're talking about geopolitics, this energy industry and this floating wind industry is definitely a geopolitical matter. Being able to develop the capacity to serve the region in something which is absolutely needed for the future economy, for decarbonization, will put whatever country that develops the capacity to deliver those floating projects at the heart of a strategic priority from a broader political perspective. So when we're talking about this feed-in tariff, we're talking about, yes, an investment, but with a long-term goal which is just amazing, which is just huge. So it's important to measure the cost, it's important to measure the benefit that could derive out of this. And when I see which could be those benefits, I see something really great. So it's important to keep that perspective into our minds, into our discussions. Maybe we should quantify better what is the upside that could come out of this. And from a cost-benefit analysis, it will be very easy to justify.
But then difficult because Asia doesn't coordinate that well, but sometimes they do, but not often. But I think it's a point And actually also raised by Henrik, the reality in Taiwan is that actually a lot of stuff comes from other Asian countries and is imported, and they're kind of working in that direction. Perhaps coming to, I think there's a lot of discussion what to demonstrate in a model, or in a model zone or in a model project. Perhaps Professor Ma, from your perspective, and then also, you know, university professors are independent advisors to the government. They sit on panels, you know, on you know, the statics of a project, on all these kind of things. If now, end of the year, there are 3 winners, and we're still lacking at least 1 project, so currently there's only 2 which are very close. 1 is coming in shooting range. Let's say there are 3 projects, what would you think would benefit the public in pulling information from these projects to make them, let's say in the first model projects, not all data was shared, which was a critique point at this point. What would be good to share so that the wider industry can learn?
That's a good question. I spent just a few seconds telling you a story that just recently happened to my class. One of the students came from the industry, and he came to the class and raised a question. So, Professor Ma, you think those mooring lines can entangle and get strangled onto those whales and dolphins? What's your opinion on that? Then I show him a picture of the mooring chain. The mooring chain is like one link is like this tall, this big. And then I show him the drawing of the mooring line. The mooring line goes down real quick. Maybe let's say you go down 70 meters and then stay on the seabed for hundreds of meters, maybe 600, maybe 500 meters. All of a sudden, she said, "Oh, okay, this is not what I was thinking. I totally got it wrong." Because there's a misconcept that the mooring line is really skinny, really thin. You can entangle the marine life. That's not true. So we need to do a better job to educate the entire industry, not just the people on the street. You know. I don't want to critique some of the speakers today, but I actually saw something, some of the points are not technically correct. But anyway, so having a prototype project or a demo project is so crucial that you help the entire industry to get educated. And my hope is that if we're going to have such a project in Taiwan Strait, I hope the developer can share most of the the learning to the industry to help each other out, because we are at a point that we can barely make it profitable. You know, we are just trying to survive. You know, every developer, if we can perhaps join a JIP, maybe join effort to do such a project and share the information, I think that would be the best.
But yeah, because we are an environmental impact assessment provider in Taiwan on a floating wind project, and exactly these questions come up in the panels and from the NGOs, which are probably very valid from the point of thinking, and this is a new thing. So, and it will need more wider education outside of very professional industry circles to showcase that. Tom, perhaps a question: who's actually kind of, if you look at APAC, which markets, how would you rank them? Who would be the next one? Like, you know.
Well, I don't want to place too much money on it. It's still very open, I think. But I think having a concrete timeline and sticking to it for a pre-commercial project like's being discussed in Taiwan that timeline they're talking about would put them at the front of the floating wind industry in APAC for a pre-commercial scale size project. We're talking 200 megawatts or thereabouts, which is it's above a demonstrator scale, and I think that timeline puts them on that path. I think if there's a potential delay in that process and delay a few years, then they could be behind other markets like Japan or Korea.
Good.
If I can build on that, I think it's tempting to try to simplify and making rankings. The reality of each country is very different, and we could rank markets according to how credible their plans are to deliver on floating wind, which is definitely a very valid criteria. There's also a matter of track record in delivering what different governments have promised. So there's a market which, at least personally, I admire in that sense, which is Australia. Australia has started relatively late in offshore wind, but has systematically delivered on the timing of their plans about approving legislation, approving a first tender, launching a first tender, and so on and so forth, which is a good sign and something to learn from for other markets. You can see markets where floating wind are going to be a critical part of the future of the country. Of course, that applies to all the markets. But when I see a market like Philippines growing economically very, very, very fast, having committed not to build new coal capacity, and having few renewable alternatives and important grid constraints, well, you really feel that offshore wind is going to be critical to meet objectives. Are we there already in terms of legislation and so on and so forth? No, but hopefully the strategic criticality, if you can call it this way, will make things happen. No? Japan, of course, has a major challenge, so that will apply as well. So I think the situation is very different. We'll see different paths. Maybe thanks God, because if everything happened at once, it would be impossible to deliver. But I think when we look at the broader APAC market region, each market individually have very strong reasons to be for a developer to be interested in.
Can I just add a Taiwan perspective? As also Claire mentioned earlier today, I think the government in Taiwan has a sort of a task that it basically relates to the fact that Taiwan, at a point in time, and that time is not so far from now, will run out of fixed bottom sites. So we need to go floating. And it's not in a timeline that's many years from now, because floating is already required in the upcoming round 3 auctions. That's, of course, a big task. The first step is to make sure that we have the stepping stone of this pre-commercial floating demo project. When we then look towards the commercial scale projects, you can say the Taiwanese government has sort of recently shown quite good determination to make sure that the regulatory framework is adjusted to make the projects happen in round 3. So the task at hand to also make the floating projects work is not so different from what it is with the fixed bottom projects. It's largely about scale. So once we have, you can say, the pre-commercial projects given confidence, then we can move on to the larger scale commercial projects. The next component is how to make it financeable. And the key there is the revenue stream in round 3. The revenue stream is corporate PPAs. And that just means that the market for corporate PPAs, which is under development and is maturing as we speak, it has been maturing for the past year and maybe longer time than that, will need to keep maturing. So the government needs to entertain and sort of support the corporate off-takers to get used to the reality of floating offshore wind. And that probably means that the corporate PPA prices will need to be adjusted. But then again, it comes back to, is there scale? Are the fundamental elements there to build a sustainable industry with a sustainable supply chain? That will definitely help make it easier. But the country needs renewable energy and electricity. It relies, as a semiconductor industry and other major industries, to get access to that. And floating wind is just a need to deliver that. So that's basically what we need. And the time scale is more or less driven by the policy, but the corporate off-takers, they are also pushing for the timeline. So in Taiwan, it's bound to happen. Otherwise, it's about the implementation of the policy failing, and it's about the industries not getting access to the renewable energy they need. And I think that's a major thing for Taiwan. So, end of it, government needs to make it work.
They need to find ways to high speed, fast delivery, because it should be 28, right? But then there's all these complexities in infrastructure that needs to be all kind of parallel.
Yes, but the fact is that the commercial projects, we cannot talk timelines, you can say, starting beyond 2030, maybe 29. So that's the time commercial needs to kick in. Otherwise, the policy will not work.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I'd like to make some supplement on that. I want to emphasize again, we don't have a port. And the Bureau of Energy, I have to say it very carefully, the Bureau of Energy has a really strong, how to put it, very ambitious goal to get this demo project completed in 2028. But the port, even if we started building it today, it won't be ready. So that's why I kept on saying that in my presentation, I have 5 essences. I kept saying that that port is our #1 priority. So yeah, again, to supplement your point.
Yeah, but then the port might say, how much floating wind do you actually want to build, right? Because it's a congested port with multiple users, so they kind of, and then when they go to the project owners might say, I don't know yet which technology I will use, and we leave that open. And then they have to do EIAs and all these kind of things. So the question is there a smart solution, but then probably a lot of smart people already thought about anything, but should that be a harbor we never thought about, or another area?
Yeah, actually I can review more information. I actually know that the Taichung Port is working on it. And they are trying to get this, remember on my slide, the wharf 106 on the outer side, on the ocean side, they are working on it. They are planning to build a wave breaker, a long wave breaker to protect the area on the outer side. So, well, but again, we're running out of time. So we need to start right away, yeah.
So it's definitely not easy, and you're raising good questions. It doesn't mean that having the port will just raising the issue will solve it. But it helps framing the context and putting some reality into target dates, for example. If 28 is a must, then we need to back plan and see how to accelerate things, or otherwise give more flexibility to the time frame. And here's where academics play an impartial role in informing what is realistic, what is not. Collaboration amongst us, there's been a lot of talk about collaboration, and I think we're all supportive of that collaboration as developers. Is very important, so that we try to pass a consistent message on this, on sharing experiences. When I hear about building the key or the platform on the outside, outside side of the port, I don't know the exact conditions there, but I get a little bit nervous because we've experienced the challenges of even small motion in quayside installation. So I think collectively we can share a lot of experience that can come into the full picture, so that we can all have a common framework about what is realistic, what is not, what is needed, what is not. Building a port is not just civil works, it's also environmental works, environmental analysis. There needs to be an EIA. So maybe for some strategic issues like this one, there could be an expedited EIA process. I don't know. We need to think creatively about how to do things, but it's very complex. Because it's very complex, collaboration is must. We need to have impartial views about things, and we need to put reality in front of the decision makers.
Because it also begs a little bit the question, Taiwan has, in round 2 and 3, is very much relying on, let's say, feed-in tariff and corporate PPA to actually finance a lot of infrastructure as well, or clawing back money to the state-owned companies. But is floating wind already there where feed-in tariff will be enough, or should, because of infrastructure, there be other mechanisms? I'm just throwing that out there, probably not getting an answer. But Japan having these subsidy schemes, are there smarter ways to support the industry? Because can you put it on the back of 3 projects which are privately funded, and then say, for example, also the word bankable, right? To make, especially now, banks very comfortable, it might be a bit tricky. It might need subsidy schemes, guarantee schemes, perhaps.
And maybe add to that remember that the equity investors, they sit with still 25% of the cash plus the majority of the risk. So it also needs to be investable. But I agree that it might be there are other of the instruments, and for the investors like CNP and other investment funds, it's also a big risk just to pay the ticket of the development of the project. So to look at sort of financial instruments to support also the development and implementation of the demonstration projects will definitely make it more investable and help pave the way for the delivery of the demo projects within the time frame required by the government.
I think also it's worth noting that floating wind projects generally take a little bit longer in terms of timeframes to develop. There is a lot more engineering that goes on, a longer period of engineering, and you need to bring the turbine supplier on much earlier in the project, which requires kind of commitment at an earlier stage compared to fixed bottom projects. So that needs to be considered when putting the timelines together for this demonstration project.
Yeah, and also another reason why it's taking so long. I mean, when we talk about monopile or to a certain extent jacket, it's common work. I mean, it's like buying a car. Just ask the color of the car and you will get the key at the end. But when it's about floating, I mean, from one concept to another, it's different element, it's different object. Even from one demo to the next stage, I mean, we already know that for our project, we will do a commercial project. The floater will not exactly look the same. I mean, there will be some improvement in the fabrication ways and also the installation and so on. So, of course, fortunately, we are learning from demo project to do it better for commercial. So it explains also why we need time. I think it's Bruno who said, before to learn or to run, we need to walk first.
Which the NVIDIA chairman would put the other way around, but he said, don't walk, run. But it's a different story. So, yeah. Perhaps, Tom, also one is talking about O&M. Is that something that will also need different considerations? Or let's see how it goes and then start.
Yeah, I think O&M is something which is not discussed that much, but there are some key challenges for floating wind in the O&M side of things, which haven't really been fully addressed yet, and that's the major component exchange. So when you need to do a blade replacement or a gearbox replacement, the strategy at the moment is generally to do a reverse installation methodology, disconnect offshore, tow the unit back to port. Again, that port infrastructure and the craneage is required. It's a very lengthy process. We've got a lot of downtime, and it's quite a costly exercise. And there isn't really I guess people aren't planning that far ahead at this stage in the projects in Asia. So that's something that should be considered when thinking about the demonstration projects.
Fully agree, and I think it goes as early as when you select the technology. Think about how you're going to do the O&M. Not all the technologies are equally suitable to bring the platform to the shore and do quayside replacement. Some of them simply cannot do that. And the first question that we received from the technical advisor of the EIB during WFO Atlantic, first question is, how are you going to do the last component replacement? Because you don't have a clear answer to that, a credible answer to that. There's no purpose of continuing the due diligence. It's over. Nobody will finance the project. Cost efficiency and bankability are two different concepts. They don't necessarily come together that automatically. But yes, absolutely. O&M cost and how to address O&M links to the port infrastructure. You need to have the port infrastructure available for doing quayside replacement. And today is the only means. What we do believe is that it can be optimized very extensively compared to what has been observed in the past. And cost could be reduced. Actually, I don't think there's any reason why the cost of replacing a last component quayside in floating wind must be necessarily higher than bringing a jackup vessel from far away in fixed bottom. But that's a very broad discussion to have.
Yeah, I fully agree with what you just said. The major component replacement is a key question you need to ask early on your project, and it drives also the selection of the concept. There is no way in the future we can tow back the floater to port. I mean, it can work for demo, but we're talking about difficulty to get port facilities, but the port facility you use during the construction will not be there anymore when you will need to do your major component replacement. Or it will be there, but it will be occupied by another project. So it's something that will be quite difficult to do. Fortunately, there are a lot of innovation right now on the market, or coming in the market to do this offshore, and yeah, it's up to come. It's will come.
Bruno, you're shaking your head, you're agreeing. Is there any comment you would like to?
I just want to say one thing. WFO's white papers on O&M, there are two free white papers. There are two free white papers that are starting to address those issues in details for major component replacements, overall O&M strategies based on what has been acquired in terms of knowledge. So it's already a good starting point. I agree, it's a major issue. Not every floater is alike. Not every floater has the same kind of work surface on which you can install equipment, etc. There are plenty of actors that are today working on self-lifting devices or lifting devices fixed on the nacelle. Tugging back to shore is not always the solution. It's each time a cost-benefit analysis, because mobilizing the vessels, unhooking, tugging, hooking back up is not necessarily a cheap affair. We saw also with Kinkerdine that if your draft is too high or too deep, you're forced to bring your floaters on another continent, or at least across the sea, instead of being able to do it locally because your draft is too big. So there's no single standard answer, but indeed it's a major thing, because let's not forget, O&M means OPEX. OPEX is you're going to drag that along for the next 25 years or even more during the entire life cycle of your floater, of your wind farm. So you better know how much it's going to cost, and you better know how to minimize that cost.
And if I can add to that, something very obvious, but surprisingly, it's not always the case, involve very extensively the turbine OEMs on this issue. They are the ones who really know a lot about it and who need to validate any process that you propose.
Yeah. We're talking too much about challenges. But I think
that's what we like, no?
Yes, that's true. But
we will also say that there will be some solution in the future.
There will be solutions to that. Yes,
there are solutions already today.
Because it's such a new and upcoming industry. It's going to be a huge opportunity also for APAC countries to kind of get into the supply chain, build their own know-how on that one. So that is definitely agreed, and then we can move forward on this. Is there anything that we forgot or you would like to add? That discussions, because otherwise I would like to thank you very much, and also for the audience to staying with us until the bitter end. It was actually a very good day, very good presentations, very good opinions, and it's really great that WFO is organizing that in Taiwan this year. So be happy to host.